But my name is Jeff Burkhardt. For those that don't know me, I'm the infrastructure planning chair for the Builders Association. We've also partnered with the American Planning Association. So we have Fred here, who's the Northern Nevada section director. And we have a special guest today. You want to introduce your?
My name is Lissa Butterfield. I'm a manager of planning and the Airport Authority. Since the major project that I worked on with the airport was what we called at the time the ABC project, which was the last time we did work in the ticketing hall. We've been there long enough to see the ticketing hall twice.
Here we are 20 years later now,
Wow.
kicking off the next one. So that's what this presentation is. Thanks everyone for attending. We're going to keep these going. Before we kick this off, we do have our next one on April 19th, and that's going to be the city of Reno. They have a number of different text amendments that they're taking forward with their zoning code, just tweaking things that weren't taken up with the last zoning code update. So I would encourage all of you guys to register for that when that comes out, hopefully sometime this week. We'll send out another link. So I'll turn it over to Lissa. Enjoy your food. Thanks everybody for being here.
Really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Before we get started, again, Fred Steinman, Northern Section Director for the American Planning Association Nevada chapter. On behalf of the chapter, a huge thanks to Van, specifically Jeff and Aaron, for their support in helping organize and host these educational sessions. Of course, Van's really stepped up, not just in terms of letting us use the great facility, but helping out with lunches as well. So again, please make sure for those of you here in person, grab a sandwich, grab a bag of chips, grab something to drink as well. For those of you attending and participating via Zoom, we are recording this presentation and we'll make it available on the chapter's YouTube channel within the next week or so. But again, just as a reminder to those of you participating via Zoom, please make sure to keep your microphones muted throughout the entire presentation. After Liza's presentation, we'll have some Q&A time for everyone here in person, but also for everyone via Zoom as well. As Jeff mentioned, this is really part of an ongoing series that the chapter with Van has been focused on developing and delivering, really focusing on how our region in Northern Nevada is tackling various issues related to our continued growth. And it's certainly a pleasure to highlight and feature the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority's efforts to continue to keep up with all that growth in terms of visitors into our region. Again, as Jeff mentioned, our next session will be on April 19th, another Wednesday at 11:30 to 1, both in person and via Zoom. That will feature the city of Reno and a presentation regarding the updating of their existing zoning ordinances. But most importantly, and save your date for this for sure, our 2023 annual state conference, the American Planning Association Nevada chapter, October 16th through the 18th up at Lake Tahoe at State Line. In the brand new event center. A save the date flyer will be coming out within the next week. We'll be sure to push it through Van as well. It should be a great conference, probably expecting it to be one of our better attended conferences over the year, given it's Lake Tahoe. We'll take advantage and bring over some of the California people to participate and play with us as well. But we get to be one of the very first groups in the brand new event center, so we'll need all of you to help beta test the facility. Plus the southern section is putting on a big old fancy party on Tuesday night. They won't tell me the details yet, but knowing it's the Vegas people, I'm sure they'll be able to put on a good show for us. Again, thank you all. Thank you to Van. As usual, sign-in sheet is making its way around. This is especially important for you AICP people that want your SNE credits 1.5 for the day, but encourage everybody to sign in. That way we can keep you apprised of future events and sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we were just talking about how awkwardly the room is set up. I will not be insulted if you incorporate these. Yes, the presentations over there. Our PR and marketing department has spent a lot of time and effort branding our huge capital projects and put together wonderful slides, and they'll be really sad if you don't get to see some of those. So if you don't make eye contact with me, I'm not taking it personally. We'll just pretend it's Zoom. All right, so once again, my name is Lissa Butterfield. I'm with the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the growth constraints that we've been seeing, as well as how we're hoping to address it in the future. So just some background for those of you who aren't familiar with us. The Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority was founded by legislative statute in 1977. We were created solely to own and operate airports within Washoe County. There's no limit on the number of airports we could own and operate, but we happen to only have two. The Reno-Stead Airport, which is a general aviation airport up in the North Valleys, as well as the Reno-Tahoe International Airport, which is what the focus of my conversation is going to be about down here. Within eyesight of this building, actually, and definitely within line of sight of the hospital that's just across the way. We are governed by a 9-member board of trustees. They're all appointed by the city of Reno, the city of Sparks, our CDA in Washoe County. Our current chair is Adam Kramer, representing Washoe County. He's got a very strong environmental background and expertise and business. So because of that, we are moving forward with sustainability practices a lot more than we have in the past. Our vice chair is Richard J, representing the city of Reno. We have nearly 300 employees at the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority across 18 different departments. We've had a huge transition in our force since the pandemic. Nearly 30% of our workforce has been hired since November of 21. We, like many companies, put a freeze in place. So as people retired or left during the pandemic, we didn't refill those positions until we knew that the economy was coming back and we were in a much more financially solid position. We are a city within a city. We've got our own fire department, our own police department, and everything on our facility to be able to maintain and operate those two airports. Just a quick snapshot of how our organization is organized. We have a very large operations and public safety is our largest department. That's where fire, police, security, as well as the people who maintain and operate the land side operations and the air side operations work. Then we have a finance and an administration team that includes IT and procurement, a small legal department, commercial properties, which handle all of our leases and tenants and property development, our marketing and public affairs team, planning and infrastructure where I am, and then a HR department that is now called People, Culture, and Equity. Largely responsible for our large hiring success, I will say. We are financially independent. We live on the revenues that we make at the airport, whether that's landing fees, leases, or rents. We do not take any state or local funding. We do have a number of user fees that are collected based on the services that we provide. So if you buy a ticket to fly out of Reno, you will pay a passenger facility charge that's collected by the airlines and then remitted back to us for use for our capital projects. If you rent a car at the airport, the rental cars will collect the customer facility fee, which is used to maintain our rental car operations at the airport. We also do take federal grants. Those have very limited eligibility and typically tied to infrastructure projects. The entire airport itself employs about 2,300 people, including the Nevada Air National Guard and all of the tenants that we have on our 1,500 acres at RNO. We do about 3.1 billion impact in Northern Nevada. This is before this large capital project, so I'm sure that number is going to go up based on the construction funding that's going to be allocated to it. This is one of my favorite graphics that we've been showing people. This shows you exactly what happened to the airport during the pandemic. In 2019, we had 4.5 million annual passengers. That was a great year for us. We have been showing very strong growth. We had forecasted continued growth, which is why we started in the 2019 timeframe some planning studies to address some of our capacity issues. We kept those projects running during the pandemic, primarily because those planning studies were funded with passenger facility charges and federal grants. And so the money was already in the bank for us to utilize, and it was limited to those uses. So in 2020, when we saw that precipitous drop in passengers down to barely 2 million, we were able to keep those planning studies going and be ready to start implementing them as the passengers started to rebound. I will say that in April of 2020, I can't remember exactly which date it was, we saw our lowest number of travelers and we had less than 200 people who walked through the airport. So we had more employees than we had passengers that day. In 2021, we rebounded a lot quicker than the expectations were. The aviation industry was told very early by experts that the rebound was going to take anywhere from 5 to 20 years minimum. Nevada itself, both airports, Harry Reid as well as Reno-Tahoe, came back pretty strongly in 21. We think that that's largely because we had a lot of outdoor activities for the leisure travelers. The business travelers did not come back in 21. It was only leisure travelers. And based on the fact that our neighboring state of California had such strict restrictions still in place much longer than we did, we think that's why we saw such a strong rebound. So 2021 was, based on those numbers, just shy of where 2019 had been. In 22, we came really close to hitting our 2019 numbers again. The Omicron variant, thank you, that kind of came back and dropped down right when that started to get a lot of press and attention, and we think that's why we hit the 4.5 again. But we fully anticipate exceeding 2019 numbers 23, which will make this the highest year since the 2008 recession at our airport. But that number there doesn't really explain why we're having growth issues, past the issues that we are currently exhibiting. For those of you who have been long-term residents here, our parking issues are spectacularly bad. We are overflowing parking lots in the middle of the weeks. We're using every remote lot we have, and those numbers don't make sense. I mean, if you just look at that number, 4.5, we have those parking issues in 2019. 4.3, we are just killing ourselves trying to find every additional bit of pavement we can park the car on. What we've been able to find out based on our analysis is the travelers using our airport are staying significantly longer than they've ever stayed before on average. So prior to the pandemic, we had a lot of business travelers that took short stays through the middle of the week. We had a lot of leisure travelers that took on weekends, and now they're overlapping. So the leisure travelers are now no longer taking 3 to 5 day vacations, they're taking 2 to 3 week vacations. So we have people using the parking lot for much longer stay. I'm going to blame work from home for the fact that people can take 3 week vacations and have family days working while they're in Hawaii or wherever they have to go. This slide right here shows our current air service. We currently have 11 airlines that are connecting to 20 nonstop destinations. This is very, very, very good air service for an airport of this size. Our peak number of airlines were 12 airlines. We just lost, hold on, look at the map. We just lost Frontier. So Frontier had been serving up until about a month ago. And the content on this slide shouldn't be a surprise to any of you folks in the room. The region is definitely growing. This exhibit right here shows you the active, approved, and pending residential units in the area. I think it's dated from 21, it looks like. The region is growing, which means the airport has to grow to match what's in the region. I will say that population growth isn't the strongest indicator for how strong an airport is going to perform. Something like fuel prices or an economic downturn will affect an airport much stronger than an actual growth in population. But we are paying attention to that. We're paying attention to demographic shifts as our population ages. We're seeing a lot more leisure travelers that are taking vacations through the airports because they're not taking driving vacations anymore. And as I mentioned earlier, our biggest impact on growth right now is our parking facilities and the space issues that you'll see in our concourse slides coming up. So we decided once we started identifying exactly how many projects were going to be needed in the relatively short time frame, that we needed to capture all those projects together and start treating it as an entire program instead of individual projects. So we've captured them all under the MoreRNO umbrella, and it is a multi-year, multi-project infrastructure investment that, as you'll see on the later slides, is potentially going to top out at $1 billion for. This is an oblique image that shows the general locations and boundaries of the primary projects in the MoreRNO program. Starting on the left, the large blue box there is a ground transportation center and consolidated rental car facility that is currently in design right now. It is a third-party investment on a long-term lease with the airport, but it is the rental cars and their partners who will be actually building that facility. We are going to be taking the opportunity when that building goes in to also make it a larger ground transportation center, which means we'll be able to shift where the shuttles and the taxis do their pickups into that larger facility, and we'll move them away from our baggage claim area. Passengers getting dropped off will continue to get dropped off in front of our ticketing hall, but when you're trying to depart the airport, most of our travelers will now be going into that ground transportation center. In addition, in the back, the largest project will be the replacement of the new concourses. In front of the new concourses, you'll see the ticketing hall expansion area. That's the project that's in the ground right now. To the far right, which you can't see it on that picture, but that's right next to where the Nevada International Guard is. We're proposing to build a replacement administrative headquarters and police station right now. Our police station is located underneath Concourse Bravo or Southwest Scout Water. And when we build those concourses, we're going to pin them into the building. So we got to get them out of the building before we start that work. In addition, we're building all of this expansion for passengers, for airlines, for our tenants, and all of our administrative offices are in that building. And that seems like a colossal waste of space because we don't need to be in that building to run the airport. So we're going to shift those functions outside of the building, which means the terminal building will be dedicated to the people who need to be physically in the terminal building. And in the shaded lines, there's 3 projects being called out in shaded lines: a future airport exit, a future airport entrance, and a parking expansion. Those are projects that will probably happen outside of the MoreRNO program in the outlying years. To focus a little on the first 2 projects in the MoreRNO program, our ticketing hall expansion and our new road improvements. What we are primarily doing with the ticketing hall expansion is we are trying to get as much physical space in the building as we can for passenger queuing and for circulation. Right now it's pretty cramped. It's even more cramped now that we've put a construction wall in the middle of it. But we're going to be able to bring that wall out almost all the way to the existing pillars. That the original curb there was very deep. It was over 40 feet wide. So we're going to take as much of that as we can. The circulation queue will be a dedicated queue up against the windows, and the passenger queuing at the different airlines will now be able to back up essentially to where the original building ended. We're going to add some restrooms. There are no restrooms in the ticketing hall. You would think that maybe that's not that big a deal, but it's turned out to be a really big deal. We don't have restrooms in there. The closest ones are right on the other side by baggage claim, but it's not convenient for passengers who are walking through the TSA area. And we have had numerous issues over the years with the lack of restrooms. So we're going to put restrooms in there. We are also going to be lifting up the ceilings as high as we can to make that look a lot more airier and open. We'll be simplifying the design in there, getting rid of some of the stonework, and replacing the entire floor with terrazzo, which is going to make maintenance in the future much better. Those individual tiles that we have are gorgeous, but they crack and have to be replaced. The new facade of the building, as you can see, is going to have a lot more glass to bring the light in. We're also going to make sure that the entrances to the airports, to the different doors, are identified and clear. I don't know how many people have seen this happen or are willing to admit they've done it themselves, but our crosswalks do not end up at a door. So it is amazing how many people walk up to the existing glass from the crosswalks because they can't see the doors. So we're going to do our best to make it really easy to find the different entrances. In addition, you can see some bollards along the curb. As the ticketing hall project wraps up, since we have some of that roadway closed, we're also going to be reconstructing that stretch of pavement that goes from the parking facilities all the way down to baggage claim. We're going to turn it from concrete to asphalt, but we are also going to do quite a lot of improvements to that stretch of road, including, you can see on the image on the bottom there, we're going to make the crosswalks themselves a lot clearer and easier to see to hopefully improve safety there. Our sidewalk against the parking garage is not ADA compliant, so we're going to be widening the sidewalk by the parking garage. We're also going to be putting fully compliant pickup and drop-off areas along the curbs. The security bollards will be there to protect from any kind of vehicle-borne threat to the building. And what's not being shown in the image is we're going to be adding additional canopies similar to what's in front of the ticketing hall to hopefully encourage more pickups and drop-offs away from the front of the building. For planners in the room, in our master plan and in a recent line of sight study, we determined that our curbside pickup and drop-off area will be level of service F in 10 years if you don't provide additional pickup and drop-off areas. So moving on to the rental car facility, the new rental car facility and ground transportation center is going to be connected to baggage claim in a covered walkway to hopefully make that 600 feet not look quite so bad to passengers who have been used to just going right across the loop road into the parking garage. But as I mentioned, that is going to house all of the taxis, the TNCs, as well as the shuttles for picking up passengers. Yes.
Is that going to be a little bit weather protected, like in the wintertime?
So in this image, this is an earlier rendering. This rendering has it fully closed. It's not going to be fully enclosed, but it is going to be shielded to protect from wind. They've done an analysis to figure out where the wind's going to be coming from. There will be some sort of shade structure, but they are still designing it. The great thing about this new facility is even though the rental cars aren't quite there yet, it's going to be fully set up so that when they transition to an all-electric fleet, they'll be able to accommodate all of their rental car vehicles.
What's in the space right now?
It is a parking lot that we use for overflow parking. The taxi queue is currently there. We have some cargo facilities that are there that are going to have to shift. But it is going to require the demolition of a number of structures. You're familiar with the properties along Terminal Way at the intersection of Terminal and Vassar. We own all the way up to that property, and there is an auto body shop that will stay, but all the buildings south of the auto body shop are going to have to come down. This is another rendering that shows what the Terminal Way side is potentially going to look like. One of the biggest benefits to the airport, beyond the fact that it's third-party development, which means it's very little of our money involved, is that when the rental cars move out of the parking garage, we're going to immediately get back 700 parking spaces. They're currently using most of the first one, yes. So when you take back where they do their quick turnaround area, as well as that first floor, we'll get 700 essentially overnight. And then we're hoping that the overall experience is going to be improved for everyone. Many of us who travel to other airports are fully comfortable and aware of separated rental car facilities that you walk to and you get to, and it makes us match a little bit more while not being so far out of the way that it requires a shuttle. The big project, the one everyone's most excited about, is going to be the replacement of our two concourses. We did a 2-year analysis to make sure that replacement was really the right option. What we found was that if we wanted those concourses to last another 20 to 30 years, even without any capacity changes, it would take us nearly $270 million to improve and upgrade those facilities, and that would give us no additional capacity. So at a price tag of almost $300 million, when you add in the design fees, decided that the full replacement was the direction to go. And as you can see, the plan is going to be to build them outboard of the existing concourses, and then demo the existing concourses at the appropriate time.
Does that basically double the capacity for planes that come in and land and park?
So
Close to that?
So by building it outboard, what it's going to give us is a dual taxi lane. In the middle right now, we have a single taxi lane. So when an aircraft backs up or comes in, only one aircraft can be in that area. But by spacing them out wider, we'll be able to have essentially 2 rows of airlines coming out at the same time. It doesn't completely double our capacity though. We are proposing to go from 23 existing gates to 28. But so some background on the concourses. They were built in 1980, and there's a comparison right there of two different 737s. When the Concourses were built, they were built for a 737 on the right, that much smaller aircraft. Much smaller wingspan, fewer passengers. The 737s right now are significantly bigger. So what's happened is, in a number of cases, we spill over into two hold rooms to board one aircraft. All of our hold rooms are too small unless you happen to be going on one of the smaller flights. Yes, sir.
Are you guys integrating anything with the collision mitigation stuff that's been coming out recently on in regards to computers basically telling that there's imminent on the
So unrelated to this project, our operations group is actually investing in technology to, they have recently acquired, have implemented technology that is going to help better monitor the aircraft in the air. And the second phase is going to be all vehicles on the ground. So I don't know what program they're using, but they are working through that. Then that was unrelated to this.
Listen, can you go back to your Concourse slide, please?
Yes, sir. Here we go.
What is the, what did you say, 28 slots versus 23? How does that math work? And I don't know anything about airports and capacity, but it seems like that's the biggest capacity issue and you're only adding, what, 20% and you're showing 40% growth in the next 40 years. I mean, you guys got that all figured out? It's
So I probably oversimplified things when I said 23 to 28.
yeah.
Our 23 existing gates all can't handle the same size aircraft. We've got 4 gates, the ones that are closest to the central portion of the airport, of the terminal building, that can only handle very small aircraft. And so they're empty 75 to 90% of the time. The larger aircraft can only be accommodated kind of near the eastern end there. So when we're moving to 28 larger, the smallest of the new gates is going to be able to handle the southwest. So there's that flexibility that will be able to handle a greater fleet.
Does the capacity of the larger aircraft also influence what you actually bring in terms of numbers?
It does, if the airlines are willing to fly those larger aircraft. We know that because of our density, altitude, and the elevation that we're currently at, larger aircraft cannot take off loaded with fuel during the heat of the summer months here. It's why that JetBlue flight is a red eye, because the amount of fuel it needs to carry and the amount of passengers it needs to carry to make it pencil out for them, they have to leave in the evening just because of our temperatures. So we do have Delta, but it's seasonal and it's very specific on when it's flying to Atlanta. All of those things are kind of taken into account. We've got our most popular request is that we get Hawaiian flights, Hawaiian Airlines, and Hawaiian doesn't like what they would have to take in terms of weight penalties to fly out here and get their fleet right. So if we're able to get them, it's not going to be because we built a bigger airfield or a bigger concourse. If we get Hawaiian, it's going to be because they figured out how to make the scheduled timing work, right? Late departures, they're able to fill up the planes and they're able to keep enough fuel on the plane that they don't have to refuel in California just to get there. For any old timers here who remember Aloha Airlines, the reason Aloha Airlines flight to Hawaii stopped in Orange County was it couldn't carry enough fuel to leave Reno on that longer distance. So capacity wise, right now we can handle a lot of aircraft. We can't handle a lot of people in the building. That's our biggest capacity constraint, is the people in the building, not the aircraft on the outside.
Oh, question to that. So that being said, if you expand the concourses, is there gonna be any change to like the operational like hours of the airport? When the latest flight comes in or leaves or?
We're technically able to handle aircraft 24/7.
Mhm.
We don't have any restrictions on what they can use. It's purely based on when the airlines want to fly. Right now, and since 21, we've transitioned to a really heavy morning push. So if you were to just pay attention to what's flying, the vast majority of our departures happen before 11 o'clock in the morning. And we don't have a lot of traffic in the afternoon. We've got tons of capacity in the afternoon and early evening. And that's just, we don't tell the airlines when they can fly, it's when it best works for them to get as many passengers in planes. Okay. So this is not the final design. As part of the planning study, we asked the planning consultant to put some renderings together on what the new concourses could look like. We are in the process of formally selecting a design team. But this is kind of some of what we're aiming for in the new concourses. It's really a crying shame that we have these brown boxes out there and you can barely see our mountains unless you're at one of the restaurants. So we really do want to make sure we open this up, make as many windows as possible, take advantage of the fact that we have over 320 days of sunshine a year and actually incorporate outdoor spaces in our concourses. That's how we kind of envision maybe the end of the piers looking. So really giving those people at the end of the concourses a chance to see something besides a door, which is pretty much all you can see right now. A door and a cheerful flight attendants. And those are some of the, I'll be honest, that road is probably the best view. So that corner is going to get a great option, but the eastern side could be looking at a lot more than what they're currently doing. You'll see we have concessions in both of those. One of the other things we're doing is this program is going to allow for 50% more concession space. And we are at max capacity right now. We don't have any space to give to another tenant to serve, additional food options unless we take away hold room space. This just kind of summarizes what we're doing. So 28 gates, they're going to all be common use, which means if Southwest needs more gates at a specific time, they can easily use any of the adjacent gates. Right now, we still have a lot of proprietary equipment at our gates, and only the non-leased gates have common use equipment, but we'll transition all of them to common use. As I mentioned, we're doubling the concession capacity from 25,000 to 50,000 feet. Dual taxi lane, which is great from an airport operations standpoint. Passengers won't notice that, but we'll notice that. And we do believe this will support our growth all the way through 2046. We do have a couple of upcoming landside projects that we've got in the schedule that they haven't determined exactly which funding sources we're going to use for them. As I mentioned, we're looking at constructing a new entrance and a new exit. That current entrance at Plum and Terminal works really well, except for when there's a crash there, which happens probably once a year, and it completely shuts down the main entrance to the airport. So this is essentially a redundant entrance past the Hyatt and a redundant exit that'll be near the ground transportation center. We will also, this is the exact same information, we will also have the ability, once we get that parking area back from the rental cars, to in the long term build an additional parking structure north of ours if we need it. And one of the big differences that we're hoping people will see in the MoreRNO program is that our board has recently adopted an arts policy. We've always been supportive of the arts. We've had an art gallery of some sort with programs annually since I've been there. But the last major art investment as part of a capital project was when the 1997 public parking garage was built. The art's no longer there. They have this interesting tile design on the outside of hands, I believe, and faces. And it didn't withstand the hot sun and eventually kind of faded out and was taken down. But we're now dedicating 1% on select capital projects to arts. The ticketing hall project is the first one to go through the process. Because we're a public agency, we decided to follow a very public process. We went through the request for qualifications process. We got over 60 applications as part of that to provide art for that. They are hopefully going to narrow that down to a final artist in the next month or so. And they're going to have about a $250,000 budget to install art in the ticketing hall. And here's the schedule of the MoreRNO program. The gray bars are planning stage, the blue bars are design, the yellow is targeted construction period. As you can see, when we hit 24, we're going to be all about construction for the next 4 years. We are hoping to have all of these projects done by the end of 29. And here's our estimated costs for these projects. The ticketing hall is clocking in at 32 million. That's pretty fixed Not at this point, since we only have about 8 months left on construction. The Terminal Loop Road project is being funded primarily by passenger facility charges. We also lucked out and got a community project funding through the new earmark process that Congress started up again to pay for the security bollards and the ADA compliance. The rental car facility is nearly $300 million, and that is the third-party development. There's going to be very little of our money going into that. We may be paying for some of the enabling projects, and we'll probably be paying for the environmental remediation. That area used to be airport facilities, and so there's some contamination in the ground there that you would expect at any airport in the nation. And then our new headquarters and police station is probably going to be around $50 million. The landside projects have not been thoroughly investigated in terms of what their costs are going to be. So that $50 million is probably a best guess. And we are trying to cap our concourse work at $570 million all in. Our airlines are going to ratify a new airline use agreement this month with their support of an investment of up to $570 million in the concourses and a 10-year agreement to continue to operate. Then I got to do this plug because unless you're really lucky, you can't get to your plane in 30 minutes anymore at the Reno Airport. Can't do it. If our parking lots are full and you intend to park, you could be parking in an overflow lot, and which then might require you to either catch a shuttle or walk a longer distance. TSA has staffing issues, so if you hit the wrong time, TSA could be queuing all the way up to the slot machines in the lobby. So we do recommend you there 2 hours before your flight. There's a new tool on our website that tracks parking availability, so you can actually go to that and it will tell you which of the lots have spaces and how many effective, the time that you logged in. And we're trying to keep as much information as possible available on our website for people when there's construction impacts. And we do have a waiting lot open at the National Guard to hopefully encourage people with cell phones, meeting people with cell phones, to wait there instead of hanging out at the curb, because our pickup curb is also now our drop-off curb until that ticketing hall is set. That's it. All right, any questions?
We do have time for questions both here and for those of you participating via Zoom. If you want, you can go ahead and type your questions into the chat box and then we'll go from there.
I got a question, Lissa. Can you go to your site plan or whatever that shows the biggest picture? I'm looking at the parking that we know as the big open surface parking lot today.
Yes. I'm gonna get there.
Actually, it's a do-over. There it is. Look at how much space is there. You guys, I'm sure several people in the room would agree that the Reno Airport has been a lot of patchwork stuff over the last 25 years.
Yes.
No criticism of anybody, but that space looks like it. In my mind, I go, there's a huge opportunity for a lot of parking vertical capacity there. Have you got that? Is that part of the mix or?
So it depends on who you want to talk to,
Yeah.
the planner or the landside operator at our airport. Because I fully agree with you. That would be a perfect place for another 2 to 3 story structure for parking.
4 or 5.
We can't go to 4 or 5. We allowed the FAA, long-term planning didn't work in this case. There's an airport surveillance radar that's over by the freeway flyovers, and it has to see the ends of the runways. And a 4-story building on that surface lot will block that radar. So we could go to 3, can't go to 4. So the planner side, yes, absolutely. That's a perfect location. It's more than big enough to put a significant amount of parking. Our landside operations group does not want to lose that entire parking lot for the length of time it will take to build the parking. So they're looking at it kind of short term, but there's a concern that if you lose that amount of parking for 2 years to build that structure, you will train your customers to no longer need to park at the airport. So we might be doing that in the future when we get to the point where we need to reconstruct the existing one. If we ever have to do significant work on the existing one, that becomes the perfect time for us to build that in advance of reconstructing that structure.
Question from John Hester. What sort of provisions are being made for other transportation modes in addition to automobiles? And you knew John was going to ask that question.
So can I clarify, when he says other modes, is he talking about rail, bus, bicycle, which modes?
Any of them.
Any of them. So we don't have a lot of bicycle traffic into our airport. We have looked at putting in lockers or areas where you can dismantle a bike and store them, similar to Portland, and we just haven't seen the demand there. We have for years worked with RTC to improve the transit aspect to it. The ridership of the airport line is always their lowest performing line. And they are hoping that they've recently moved it so it's only serving Terminal A. The RTC bus no longer comes into the airport at all because they can't get the riders at the one stop at the airport. So the ride now stays along Terminal A. We're hoping that we'll see some kind of an intake, but we're not having much of that. We have not made any plans to incorporate rail. We think that'll probably be more of a regional decision if rail is appropriate for the other users. And then I guess the most we have done with any of these is to make sure that we are looking at electrification and battery storage to be able to handle electric vehicles in whatever shape and form they're coming in.
Is there a lot of cars that just live in that parking structure?
Yes.
Is there any functional way of notating such life?
So we actually track how long vehicles are there. We have actually towed after, I believe it's like 9 months in our parking structure. Yeah, it's
I mean, I can only tell because I've driven up there and the amount of soot is basically like the rings
Yeah.
on a mountaintop.
So we've not pushed what customers are wanting for parking. And the easy solution is to make it much more expensive and let the market bear that out, right? I mean, we'll reduce our parking demand if we make it more expensive. The large scale pricing change we are going to be implementing starting July 1st is we are going to try to train our customers to start using the first floor of the garage as a short-term parking lot, the way it was built. So that short-term lot was really aimed, that first floor was really aimed at people who are escorting an elderly parent, to their plane and then going back to the car, or they're picking up children, or they're just picking up their family, or they're here for a couple hours. But it is apparently $26 is nothing to most people on a daily basis, and people are using that lot for 2 weeks. And they're just paying that daily amount. So we're going to greatly increase the cost of that short-term lot to start to make sure that the people using that, but what that's going to cause is spill over into the other lots. So those people will hopefully shift to the other lots. And in case you're wondering how we really know that they're using it, because at 2:00 in the morning, when we have no travel going on and we don't have any employees working, except for security and a couple of others, we still have 50% of that parking lot full.
Wow.
2 a.m. in the morning.
So why would somebody abandon their car for weeks?
Because they decided that it's cheaper to abandon the car than it is to pay the amount it's going to cost to. Yeah, most of those vehicles pay after they leave, so they haven't paid yet.
It's like a storage locker, storage wars.
It can be, yeah. We also have had, and this is just anecdotal, we've had legislators from Vegas who leave their car in our airport parking lot when they're not in session, and then they come back when they are in session and pick it up.
Cheaper than renting a car, I guess?
Rick, do you have a question?
Yeah, just as a semi-frequent user, the TSA, that 2-hour thing sometimes isn't enough. Just because sometimes you get through there in 15 or 20 minutes, other times it could be closer to 2 hours. Are you guys trying to figure out, I know TSA's, you mentioned the staffing problems, and morons like myself should just get the fast track and figure it out. But are you guys trying to address the TSA?
We are, and we have been. We have a very good relationship with them. We make sure that TSA has well in advance what we expect our throughput to be. So based on the amount of seats that are sold for every flight, they get that information so that they know how to staff those specific windows. We've also actually been helping them find employees. So we are regularly posting job fairs for them so that they can hopefully get more employees. But it boils down to the amount of employees that they have staffed and available to do it. If you've been at those times when it does take that long, you'll probably have noticed that not all of the checkpoints are actually open. So they've essentially only staffed the queues that they can handle at that time.
That's
Do they staff flights before then?
I'm sorry?
Do they staff flights or bring staff in? Or-
So I don't know if they're bringing anyone in. I'm just aware that it's an issue nationwide.
Okay.
In fact, the FAA has recently told New York, JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark to encourage the airlines to use larger aircraft because their towers can't handle the amount of operations that are coming out of that area based on the FAA staffing.
Mhm. I was in like hospitality industry, so they, and we were bidding on hotel stays because they were that short of staff. So I was wondering if they got.
I don't know how TSA does it. The customs doesn't move people, you have to volunteer. So customs employees will be told, here are the airports that need additional help. They won't make any of their employees take the assignment, but you can volunteer. I'm just not sure how TSA and FAA have it.
Chad's been waiting patiently with the question online. With the expansion and new plane technology, will flight paths change and potentially affect existing noise contours and mitigation?
No, our expansion here will not change the flight paths. The FAA on a regular basis, probably at 4 to 5 year interval, goes through and looks at all of their procedures and determines if they need to be shifted. Our last set of changes to the flight paths occurred when we changed the magnetic declination of the runways from 16 to 17. And in order to make those changes, the FAA looked at all their procedures at that time. So what we're seeing right now is that we should see, we don't expect our noise contour to expand. Right now, the FAA is still holding fast to their premise that significantly impacted residents are those that reside in 65 dBA DNL contour. And anyone outside of that is not significantly impacted. And over the years, ours has shrunk based on technology and quieter aircraft. Community may not fully believe this, but our noise contour gets smaller and smaller and smaller every year, nearly every year. During the pandemic, our noise contour was solely on our own property. It shrunk that small because we lost all those commercial airliners for such a long time period. I will say that the FAA, based on surveys and scientific studies that they've done recently, is looking at changing their definition of significant exposure. So if that threshold changes, then it'll be a whole new conversation.
So that's interesting. I think, City of Reno has the noise contours hard coded into their zoning code from the old 2005
Yes.
study.
Yeah.
And certainly not what you just described. Wonder if that's something that could easily be changed from a
It's definitely
graphical standpoint.
But
I'll tell Angela.
Give her
But
another
if you,
assignment.
you'd be surprised at how many people 2 miles away from the airport are really bothered by noise.
Yeah.
It's a difficult threshold. A lot of people who are close to the airport don't actually complain about it and tend to get more complaints about the noise further afield. We mentioned demographic shifts earlier. There's a lot of heavily regulated airports in California that were regulated for noise prior to federal intervention preventing that. And so we do get a lot of people who move here who have an expectation that the airport shuts down at 11 o'clock. Hey, why are you flying after 11? Shut down at 11, like.
Why are you not cutting your engines off over houses kind of thing? Yeah. I know we get complaints from all of our all of them. Several of our homeowners in the Spanish Springs with the approach up there. And we just tell them, you signed a disclosure saying you lived underneath its flight path, sorry.
Sun Valley gets hit
Oh,
hard,
yeah,
hard, like scary hard sometimes.
So, based on wind, we are about 80% of the time on south flow, which means we're taking off to the south and we're landing from the north. And it's interesting because when we are on north flow, there's less people bothered by noise. For some reason, because of the terrain and how heavy the aircraft is, when they're landing from the north, so when they're landing from Spanish Springs, that bothers those residents more than when they're taking off over them. And then the people to the south, it's the same thing. It's when they're coming in from the south, we get a whole bunch of different people who get really frustrated because it's flying the other way. But you got to take off into the wind, so can't change that.
What is the source for your statistics of 320 sunny days a year? Because I've been here for 8 years and I've never seen it. I've been here for 8 years.
Really?
This year we had 320 snow days.
This is probably,
That's fine.
this is a fluky year.
Yeah. I mean, how does an airport mandate removing shoes and belts? I've always wondered. Some places you fly in, leave them on, some places take them off. Is it more expensive TSA equipment to go through the checkpoints or?
So my understanding, and I'm now outside of my area of expertise. My understanding is TSA has 2 primary types of equipment, 3. We don't have the third. The third is the one that has that recirculating belt like a bowling alley. So you don't actually have to handle the pins, they just kind of circulate through. But one of them is actually able to see through your shoes, tell that you don't have anything in your shoes, as well as interpret your belt as a belt and not as a potential weapon. And those are the equipment they typically have in the pre-check. So if you're not pre-check and you get moved to a pre-check, they'll tell you to leave your shoes and your belt on. But if you're in a non-pre-check lane, they will typically never tell you to do that.
Are you planning to build one concourse at a time?
Yes, that's the initial plan. But we've got interviews with the design teams in the next couple of days, and 2 of the design teams have ideas on how we can do them both at the same time.
And will you have to change how many planes can land or do anything like that during that process?
We will have to change, we won't have to change how many planes can land. We will have to change how many aircraft can park at the gates. And we have hard coded into our design agreement and into our airline agreement that we will never have less than 17 gates operational during construction. I'm gonna go to Stacy.
Sorry, I have a non-Reno question.
Uh-oh.
No, I Lissa, it's nice to see you, thank you for coming. So much great stuff happening at RNO. I just wonder if there's been any long-term discussions for Stead. And I ask that knowing that now the air races are talking about their last year, so are there discussions, have there been discussions about improvements at Stead following all of this work? And that's kind of long range, so if you don't want to get into it, that's okay, but.
Yes. What we're actually going to do is we're going to do a brand new master plan at Stead. So the last one was started in 2008. We didn't finish it until 2010, which meant the forecast was super aggressive because 2007-8 there was this huge boom that was still happening before they hit. We never hit the forecast in the 2010 master plan, but with the air races going, and the master plan assumed the air races were going to stay. So with the air races going and all of the additional development that's starting to surround the airport, it's perfect time for us to do another master plan. Because of our federal grant assurances and then the double whammy of most of the Stead property being military surplus land and therefore really restricted by the FAA, we need a master plan to say how we're going to develop it before they'll support any major changes. So, new master plan.
Thanks.
Sure.
Probably half the times that I've flown since COVID began, the TSA pre-check wasn't even open. What is happening with that now? Is it open more?
are we dealing with more delays because of TSA staff?
When they have a staffing issue, that's the first one they close.
Which is kind of a pain because you went to a lot of trouble to get it.
And you're paying for it too. It's-
First one, I missed it on the timeframe slide, but if you run both concourses simultaneously, what's the construction timeframe? Since that looks like it's pretty much the last piece of the puzzle.
So, I will say that there've been a couple of fronts. The benefit to doing them both at the same time is a shorter overall construction period. So if we can shrink the construction period, we are automatically making that project cheaper. Which at 570 million, I want to make that as cheap as I possibly can.
Yeah, so 2.5 year build per
Mhm.
concourse would be staggered.
Yeah.
And then the second one was, when this is fully up and running, I don't know if you had it on the slide, but the airport staffing, how much will that increase to be able to accommodate this?
So we have just penciled an agreement with an executive program management group. It's gonna go to our board next week for approval. Essentially, we're hiring a team to help us get through the next 5 years, so that we don't grow our planning, environmental and engineering department to an unsustainable level and then have to shrink them back at the end of this project. What is gonna grow is our facilities and maintenance team, and it's gonna shift. We're gonna have so much more square footage and windows that our custodial staff is gonna have to take care of. They've already, I don't know those exact numbers,
No,
but
that's
they actually extrapolated how many more staff members they're gonna need to maintain the larger facility. What we're not gonna need are the large number of people we have that are keeping our systems limping along. So as we're gonna build a brand new central utility plant that's gonna power those two concourses. So there's a bunch of things that we're gonna be able to shift in terms of facilities and maintenance. Yes, sir. Oh, let me grab her first, because she's.
Okay. I was just curious if there was any plan to like implement solar into the picture.
So, I didn't point it out, but the rental car facility is planning to have solar canopies on the top of their facility, and they're gonna try to get as much as they can, based on that. We will be looking at solar as part of the concourse work. So our challenge is, based on where we're located, we need the solar panels to aim south. And they can't create a glare at the tower across the field. So we'll have to do an analysis to figure out exactly how many we can put and is it viable on those locations. But yeah, we're looking at that.
I'm assuming this construction will be substantially scheduled, like starting at like 8 p.m. and finishing at 4 a.m. daily, or?
I think it's going to depend on where it is located.
And then secondly, I can't conceive of having the entire thing being built at the same time.
We're intrigued. Let's put it this way. The planning study recommended one at a time on purpose. But I will say that in order to make that work, they're going to have to do prefab or modular construction off-site and bring in pieces. So the only way to make them work at the same time is if they're not building it next to the concourses. They're going to have to build it somewhere else, which might mean we'll have something to use Brookside for the next 5 years. Those of you who've been wondering why we haven't reopened the golf course.
I know that there were conversations in the past about a new cargo terminal, right? I didn't see it on any of your improvements. Has that come off the table longer term?
It's still on the table. We have a third-party developer who is interested in building replacement cargo facilities to the south off of where that Moana extension goes, and we have vacant property to the south. They're not willing to invest in the airfield infrastructure. They just want to build the buildings and the landside improvements. And so we've got kind of a competing, what can we pay for? Our estimate on the new cargo ramp was in excess of $80 million, just to replace the existing cargo that we have to the north.
Does cargo make up a big percentage of the revenue?
Yes.
And has that been growing all the time with Amazon Prime and all the other?
2021 was nationwide the highest year of cargo freight off in the United States because of when we were in the pandemic. But we haven't dropped much since then.
So
We
what
haven't
percentage of that,
of our overall revenue.
I'm just kind of curious, trying to get an idea of how much planes using the airport, how many of them are cargo or what's passengers?
From an operations standpoint, the cargo flights are about, I'm gonna do math in my head, so it's less than 10% of our departures compared to our passengers. Any more questions from you?
No more questions on Zoom. Any more questions in the room?
Oh, well, thank you.
And huge thank you to Lissa, and of course, on behalf of the APA Nevada Chapter Northern Section, huge thank you to all of you for being here today. And again, thanks to Van for helping host these events. Again, next event, April